All right, Mike Watkins, HurricaneTrack.com, HurricaneAnalytics.com. With an update on Dorian, continues to be an extremely powerful Category 5 hurricane. It is currently making landfall, or has made landfall, over Abaco Island in the Bahamas. Maximum sustained winds are actually up again to 185 miles per hour. Before it was at 180, now it's up a little bit more. Pressure is down to 911 millibars, and it might have been down to 909 for a little while before it made landfall. But you're looking at the mid-level water vapor loop, because I want to talk about a couple of the features that are making this happen and what could be impacting the steering flow over the next 24 to 36 hours. These are both very important things. But again, you can see the eye right there. So what's happening here in some ways is we're seeing a tremendous outflow or mass sink away from the hurricane. So if you think of at the surface, the winds are counterclockwise and they're rotating into the eye of the storm, right? But at the top of the storm, you have to have an exhaust to kind of get rid of all of that cold air that's produced as a result of the convective process as you get a hurricane churning up the heat engine. So this storm has had excellent low-level structure, even when it wasn't intensifying earlier last week. And then once it got north of Puerto Rico, it went crazy because there's a dip in the jet stream back here that's acting as a mechanism to vent the hurricane at the upper level. So it's taking the cold air and getting it away from the storm, and it's tremendously strong and powerful. So that's one of the reasons that this storm is so strong. The second is it's going over water that's about a degree warmer than normal for this time of year, and this time of year it's already extremely warm. It's the Gulf Stream flowing through here, from the Gulf of Mexico. And I did want to just kind of talk about one misnomer. The Gulf Stream is not the only thing that does is put water under the storm. It does not affect the steering currents at all. So a couple people have said, well, once it gets to the Gulf Stream, that'll take it out. Well, no, it's the atmospheric features to the north of it. It is coupled with the ocean, certainly, but for the most part, the water is not going to change its direction. The direction comes from the atmosphere itself. And so what we are seeing now are two, actually, but before I jump into the details of what we're looking at here, notice over Florida, we're seeing some dry air kind of pushing in. This is also exhaust from the envelope of Dorian and a bit of a ridge of high pressure that's developed to the west of the storm. But we can also see that we're starting to see, here's what appears, or at least is being influenced by the circulation. That might be more land-based from daytime heating. But we're just now on the cusp of getting the outflow over us. So the cirrus outflow is going to continue. It's going to stay warm today. And then tomorrow we're going to start dealing with some bands. Actually, we probably will see some of those come in later on this evening. As you can see here, it'd be better to look at radar, but you can see already that the storm is pushing bands between the Bahamas and Florida. Those are going to come in and they're going to be squally, and the weather is going to be bad. So if you have things to do like put up shutters or panels or anything that requires dragging heavy things around, today would be the day to take care of it. All of the indications are that we will not see a landfall in this part of Florida, but it's not moving any further south. It's basically moving due west right now, perhaps even a little bit. In that last frame, it even looks like maybe a little bit north of due west, which is good if it continues that way. Sometimes these guys wobble. But the weather is not going to get any better from here on out than it is now to go ahead and take care of things, because as this continues to move in this general direction, right, all of this stuff that's down here is going to move out over us, and that's why there's tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches up, and we'll see if those change at 5 p.m. or not. So mass sink behind it, nothing above it to really shear it, but what's now we're looking at is this flow out over the United States. The storm is the steering currents north of the storm are breaking down, and we know that that's happening because the ridge of the storm itself is slowing down. This ridge is ultimately going to collapse in about another 18 to 24 hours and completely go away, and that should spring the storm north, either near the Florida coast or over the Florida coast or just off of it, or hopefully 60 miles away. We don't know that detail yet, but what we do know is that the effects of the storm will affect us. So The hope is once this kind of jet stream movement breaks the storm down, the storm will kind of meet up with a weakness in the upper level flow and get taken out, away from the United States. That's the hope, right? But there's also a chance that it won't completely get picked up, and then another ridge will build behind it, and we'll see some sort of movement into the the Carolinas or closer to Georgia, or that remains unknown. The official forecast is not for that to happen, but and it sounds like everybody along the Carolina, Georgia, and the Florida East Coast is preparing as if the storm's going to come there. And then what's the worst that happens? It doesn't come, and then you're prepared for the next one. So that's what we've got going on in the satellite. And again, there's no reason to think that this will weaken significantly as it passes over. There will be, like even in the visible imagery, you can see that low-level clouds have developed in the eye. That's a normal thing because it's interacting with land, but it doesn't necessarily mean the storm's weakening. It will fluctuate up and down. Probably will lose a little bit of steam when it passes the island, but not much. Those are flat islands. So here's a look at the latest models, and a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, on TV and even on the internet, you see people just plop the spaghetti plots down and say, oh, here's all the models. And then when you look at this, you're like, oh man, there's some stuff pointing to Florida, and there's some stuff that doesn't make sense. Well, here's what's going on with that. This is the extrapolated motion of the storm. So if it just kept moving in a straight line for the next 5 days, this is where it would be. And just for reference, Palm Beach is like right there. So the center is already pretty much moving straight toward Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, but again, it's going to turn. And most of the models and the official forecast have it turning north of Freeport and heading up the East Coast. Again, without certainty on how close or far it will be away from us when the turn starts. But then you've got another model here that shows a landfall. This is an experimental model. You get another model here, which is a simulation of what would happen if the hurricane were in the low levels only, without any changes in pressure. It's an old barotropic model. Those they just don't have any skill outside the deep tropics, and even then it's a little limited. And then there's some statistical models that just, again, aren't. So when you look at these things, you see all these storms, and especially these goofy tracks like this that don't make any sense. That's because somebody didn't filter out the models that don't have any skill. They just show them all. I guess the idea is maybe more people see a line on their house, the more concerned they'll be. I don't know, or if it's just lazy, or if it's ignorance, or whatever. I guess that's not the point right now. But the point is, though, that this is not a goofy model. This is the HWRF, and it shows a landfall in east central Florida, north or east southern northern Florida, in a couple of days. And again, that's not out of the question. But for the most part, the consensus now, and most of the ensemble members now, have also shifted away from bringing tracks over southeast Florida, at least. Again, it's right now it's about 180 miles away. When it makes the turn, it's going to be it should be about 90 miles away when it starts floating north. If that turn delays for 12 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours, it could be much closer, and we'd have a lot more effects here in Florida. If it turns a little earlier, that would be good news for everybody. But again, we don't know, and the probabilities are still up in the air that we'll deal with tropical storm force or hurricane force winds, even if it's on the backside of the storm. Then the other thing to keep in mind when this storm goes by, it has essentially a tail to it. In other words, there is a trough of low pressure and you can see it here, that's bending around into the storm. As the storm gets displaced to the north, that trough of low pressure will be over Florida. So even if we don't get the bands, we'll get bands, but even if we don't see a direct landfall, there's a possibility that trough could set up and on us and give us squally and rainy weather throughout the week. So that's also something to be aware of. But today is the day to prepare if you're in southeast Florida. We're still on the fence of whether or not we're going to put up shutters. It's not a big effort for us. It takes about an hour. We just have a couple storm panels and everything's hurricane glass. So I'll do it if I have to. I've got some bolts and anchors that I needed to put in anyway, so I'm going to do that part at least. And then we'll make a decision late tonight, and before I go to bed, it'll either go up or not. up to you, especially if you're in Palm Beach County, I'd say for sure plan on putting shutters up. You never know. There's shutters going up all around the neighborhoods here in in Oakland Park and in Fort Lauderdale, and people are being vigilant and prepared, and I think that's great. But it's up to you, because at some point there's going to be a trade-off between risk of personal injury to dealing with trying to do that kind of thing in the wind versus reward of not having your windows broken and your roof blown off. I don't think this is going to be a blow your roof off situation for anybody south of Palm Beach County. The possibility of that is not zero, but it's not very high either. So that's a personal decision. Even the meteorologists down here, some are saying put up shutters, another guy saying if you're south of Palm Beach, don't put up shutters. At this point, it's up to you. And then if for some reason the storm isn't going to turn, and by the time we have the evidence that that might be the case, it might be too late to put them up anyway. So, again, that's the decision that I'm going to make tonight. I think in the morning is probably going to be too late for that. So anyway, that's all I've got for now. Mike Watkins, thanks again for watching this update. And as things happen over the next several days, I'll upload several hours and couple of days, I'll upload more as needed. Thanks.